economic freedom, there are some vulnerabilities that are less in a more autocratic societies. And this asymmetry is used by our adversaries. Second point, which is interesting to discuss maybe also in this panel, is the nature of the hybrid threats exploiting the threshold of attribution. So it's not declared warfare, open influencing activities, but indeed it tries to exploit the threshold of attribution. For example, when using proxy actors or cyber venues, the original perpetrator of those activities are difficult to identify. And even though we might guess who it is, the deniability through competing narratives makes the response more difficult. Third sort of element in the hybrid threats is exploiting the threshold of military response. We already had a nice discussion in the corridors during the last break that this is something we should work on within the EU and NATO contexts, how to build this kind of thresholds of at least some kind of response to hybrid threats. When our adversary is using this threshold of military response, it is to minimize the cost and avoid the response by blurring the border between war and peace. We are very clear in our response when the threshold of use of force is crossed, then we have the processes clear. But when our adversary is acting below those thresholds or in the gray zone, then we are more unclear in our processes. So with these three elements, I would like to give the floor back.
Thank you, and well inside the 5 minutes. Quick question. You talked about the systemic vulnerabilities of the West. Could you point out some?
For example, as I mentioned, the freedom of speech, and that can be exploited by our adversary, but in the information operations where you can freely put the competing narratives to the public and reach most of the citizens. And in some autocratic countries where, for example, the media landscape is dominated by state-owned media outlets, that kind of reach in those countries by foreign information campaigns is much more difficult. Economic freedom, one example, we are very much believing the freedom of sort of capital and investment, and we sometimes allow the adversaries to, for example, buy land close to critical infrastructure or buy also some critical infrastructure like harbors and so on, which are creating then vulnerabilities in our societies.
Right, or buy up London by money squandered from Russian people. But let's move on now to Eva, basically from theory to practice. Could you tell the audience what have you seen in action in Latvia? What is a threat picture? And what type of Russian activities have you observed in the hybrid front?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, but sure, I will do that, but maybe I will start from a Russian perspective, because what I do in my academic research, I focus more on Russian mindset. And let's say, and if you read Russian military doctrine and other military-related pieces, so you get really a mindset which tends to combine conventional and unconventional warfare, which tends to integrate military and non-military means of achievement of political and military goals. And let's say if you refer to the famous article by Vladimir Gerasimov, and now it's trendy to say that actually there is no Gerasimov's doctrine, but anyway, if you look at his conceptualization, then one of aspects that he notes is that the ratio between military and non-military means is 1:4. So in other words, you use the use of non-military means is exceeds 4 times the use of military means. And I think this is the main aspect why we are using this concept of hybrid affairs, because it is a fusion of different attempts. So what else you see in Russia's mindset is also